Good morning, folks. Not long after I posted the video for the long and short strategy, I had a request or a question asking how I go about selecting a runner that will shorten in running. I thought I'd take the opportunity therefore to go through a number of online resources that would help you do so, help you make your pick, essentially along the same lines as the resources I pointed out for the greyhounds in an earlier video I did some time back now. Most, or certainly some of these websites you're probably already familiar with, and certainly you need to become familiar with them if you're doing anything in running, in my view. If you're simply scalping the pre-race market, I wouldn't bother. But if you're looking to do any sort of trading or gambling or dutching or laying in running, I think you really need to get that extra information to point you in the right direction to make an intelligent decision that will hopefully increase your chances of making a profit. So without further ado, let me just run through the websites that I tend to use, some more than others, but you should be aware of them if you aren't already. The first one, of course, is the Racing Post, racingpost.com. To be perfectly honest, I hate this website. It was redesigned 4 or 5 years ago and it turned into a slow, clunky, difficult to navigate behemoth, which I've never really taken to. But it does give you access to a huge amount of information. For example, if we just bring up the card for Brighton, and right away we see information regarding the race conditions, the going and so on. The standard information that you'll see on any card in any newspaper or virtually any other source that you go to online. So you've got the horse's historical record in terms of form, information about whether it's wearing blinkers or whether it's a course and distance winner and the like, its age and all this sort of stuff. And on each individual card for each race you can access trainer information, which will give you this pop-up here, and you can run through all of that. Similarly for jockeys you can do the same, and of course, not surprisingly, you can do the same for the actual horses. And so you can wade through all that, its historical record. There's a heck of a lot of information there, and to be perfectly honest, if you were to try and do that for every race, there simply isn't enough hours in the day. So you need to develop mechanisms in which you can quickly eliminate either races or specific runners in a race, to try and minimize the amount of time that you're doing that. But I point these things out to you, so if you want to go into those and look in greater detail and get used to reading form and information about trainers and jockeys and so on, you can do. In addition to that, you'll find here some links under the more info bit, the verdict, that pops up another page. Most of these things here you can't get at unless you are a member of the Racing Post Club, which actually costs a subscription fee per month. What I'm going to do essentially is point you in the direction of the verdict and the comments. The verdict, for each race, the Racing Post will give you an idea of what it thinks is the likely winner. So it's picked out Tiger's Home with the possibility of C Vermont and Spick and Span, giving it a good run for its money. And you'll get that type of thing for every race. So right away you can potentially use that type of information to help you narrow down onto a selection of runners, without you having to go through every single runner in each race in a day. Also, another thing that might be useful is the comment section, whereby if you scan these, when you're really scanning these sentences for negative information, that will help you immediately discount particular runners. So for example, this one, Interact, nearer last than first, it's always be last month and best watched until showing some promise. Now that's not to say, of course, that this particular race that he's running today will be his race. There's no guarantees in this game. But things like that will say, right, okay, we could perhaps discount that and we'll concentrate on some of the other runners. So, for example, Spick and Span, ability to figure, for example, see Vermont respectable 6. You know, to be honest, I'll actually discount that one. I don't really like the look of that at all. However, I'm not here to make picks for you today. I just want to flag up some various sources of information. So have a good browse around the Racing Post site. There's information to an incredible degree, and you can certainly waste a heck of a lot of time on the Racing Post site if you get that way. But by browsing around the site, you'll see what sort of information is available to you, and it may give you ideas with regard to how you want to take your betting and what areas that you might want to look at. The important thing, of course, there is that if you do the same as everybody else, nobody will get any value on the bets they're making, because the prices will short. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of the Racing Post site. What you may find, however, rather than going into the Racing Post site, depending on what sort of depth you've gone in, that summary information that I gave you is also available on its sister site, the betting.racingpost.com. And so if we go to Brighton here, and that first race that we looked at, we'll get this page coming up. This is similar to the page that you have in the Greyhound Racing, if you saw that video I did earlier on in the year. If we scan down, here we have a number of bits of information. Again, same sort of thing really, but again, you can click on these links and you get up, surprise surprise, the same pages. I find this site easier to navigate, to be perfectly honest. You get the betting forecast here, and at the top you get this virtual racing simulator, similar to the one that you saw on the Racing Post, which gives you a very quick visual representation of what the Racing Post thinks is going to be the winner. And what you should find, with its default settings, surprise surprise, it gives you the 3 in its racing forecast. I'm not overly confident on the value of this virtual race thing. However, you may find that if there's an issue or a trainer has a particular record at this course, you can adjust these and see what happens and see if that readjusts anything. Not in that particular case, but you get the idea. You see the Interact suddenly comes shooting forward. So there may be angles that you can use to get into that particular area. Okay, so that's the betting site. So it gives you a better summary, I think, of the Racing Post site. So you might actually want to use this site first initially, and then if you want to go into greater depth, switch to the Racing Post site if so required. That's the option. So again, as I said earlier, you can get to all the information that's on Racing Post via this site as well. So it's certainly, I think it's certainly easier to navigate. One of the other things, next site that you should be familiar with, is the Sporting Life site. Again, this is actually a very good site, and it's a lot quicker, in my opinion, than the Racing Post site. So the same sort of thing, and it will give you much the same sort of information. So you can go to the particular runner's record, and there you go, a record of all its races, jockey, trainer, winner, and so on and so forth. So much the same information that's on here is available on the Racing Post and a host of other racing sites, to be perfectly honest. So it's a case of identifying which site you find most comfortable, and how quickly you can navigate it and so on. Because what you want to do is reduce the amount of time you're spending looking for this information, trying to narrow down on your particular picks. One thing I'll flag up with this particular site, however, is the rating system. you'll see it gives a very quick representation of how it rates each horse for this particular race. So you might be looking at Spick and Span, Astral Rose and Tiger's Home, whereas the Racing Post was flagging up C Vermont. And quite clearly Sporting Life disagrees with them. So that's another option that you perhaps look at. Essentially what you're looking at, you're trying to do is find as many opinions, points on the curve if you like, that will help you narrow down into any one particular runner. So again, I'll leave you to explore the Sporting Life site in greater depth, and now that I've flagged it up to you, and we'll move on to the next one. Now the next one, the Timeform site, is my first port of call. Find it at forum.horseracing.betfair.com, and this site will give you essentially all the same information as Racing Post and so on. So if we go to the 205 today at Brighton, we'll see here similar type of thing. They give 3 horses, Spick and Span, Johnny Splash in this case, and Tiger's Home. Certainly everyone seems to be thinking Tiger's Home's got a good chance. But if we scroll down, you can see that we've got links to top jockeys, top trainers, same sort of thing as you'll find on Racing Post and Sporting Life. But there's one thing that this site does that the others don't, and that is a historical record of its in-running performance in the Betfair markets. So here we see the similar type of information: course and distance, winner, its form, figures and so on. But if we click on a particular one, Johnny Splash in this case, we go to a page for this particular runner where it's running in this today, and then its previous races, and this is the important information here. In particular, you'll see that down here we have its Betfair starting price listed, and down here we have its lowest it hit in running, and it should be flagged up. That's the lowest that it hit for £100 worth of money in the market. So it may have actually touched lower than that, but that's where the lowest point, where a complete total of £100 was matched within the market. So here we'll see here, it went off at 5.38 and it hit 2. Went off at 40, hit 24. Went off at 9.55, hit 8. So you can see this horse is actually a fairly consistent shortener. Here's one where it actually won the race, as indicated there, and you'll see that its highest it hit in running was 5.9. In other words, this horse did not drift during that race. It went off at 6.37, and the highest bet that was taken was 5.9. Again, that's for a total of £100. It may have drifted a little bit higher than that for £2 or £3. But you can see here, other than that one there, it's shortened in every single race. Now, of course, we can then go, you can filter this by going, by course. So we're at Brighton today, so let's see what its record at Brighton is. And then we get the record at Brighton, and it's not quite so favourable. Shortened, drifted, shortened, won after having hit 500. Shortened a bit, halved in price, didn't do anything, shortened a little bit, high odds. So it's actually not too bad in terms of shortening in price at Brighton. So again, I'll leave you to explore that in greater depth. But you'll see, even with this information here, doing it for every horse in every race can take some time. So another place that you may want to go that contains this information is in this website here, promo.betfair.com/betfairsp/prices/index.php. This provides the historical day-to-day record of every runner in every race, and presents these as comma delimited files, which allows you to import them into a spreadsheet or a database. And each of these files for each of the horses in each of those races contains this information. So that's sort of the inbuilt ID information regarding the horse, its name, the event, and so on. But this is the important thing here. You'll see IP min and IP max. That gives you the in-play odds that it hit, both in terms of its max odds and its min odds. But you've also got further information regarding the amount of money that was traded and so on. It's a bit for your starting price and so on. So by importing that into a spreadsheet or database, I would actually suggest you use a database application as opposed to a spreadsheet. The reason being is this stuff here, that's for the 17th of this month, July 2014, this information goes all the way back to 2008. And if you were to import all of that into a spreadsheet, you'd be struggling, because there's easily well over 60 megabytes of data there, and of course it's getting added to every day, because these things get updated every day. So a database, a proper database application, whether it's Microsoft Access or LibreOffice Base, or indeed using a server-based database like MySQL, you'll actually find that maintaining that data is a lot easier, and because those applications are more designed for large data sets. But the point about this is that it allows you to build up a database that you can search easily without having to manually go in and wade through all this information here. So I recommend you start downloading those. Okay, right, one last thing. You may be familiar with the BetDAX site, but I'm actually going to flag up something in particular to you. The tip check. The tip check actually goes off to another website called Best Tipping. And what it does is it collates all the tips from all these sources, the Irish Independent, the Racing Post, the Express, the Guardian, so various newspapers who are making tips. Now you might think, oh, hang on a minute, well that sounds quite good. We've got a few people here who are selecting Tigers home, we've got Spick and Span. There could be a possibility of Dutching these. However, I'll give you a little warning. If we actually go to the corresponding page that brings up exactly the same information, if we actually go to the tips table, over the previous 30 days, for a flat stake of 50 quid, you'll see SPs, industry SPs, they're all running a loss over the past 30 days at BetDAX prices, which are fairly similar to Betfair prices. We can actually see half of them in the past 30 days have made a profit, the other ones haven't. But if we expand that over 90 days and then 360 days, this takes a little while because there's a lot of information to come through, so we need to wait for that to refresh. There we go. You'll see that there's only 2 of them at the moment who are running a profit. Now when you think about that, even if you're betting every single runner that the Daily Mail picks, for 50 quid, they're £9,000 in profit. That sounds great, doesn't it? But when you think about it, each of these tipsters is picking a horse in every single race that's held on every single day, although some of them don't make picks for Sundays. So you're looking at a huge number of races held through a year, sticking 50 quid on every one of them. It's a terrible return on investment. Even 9,000. But there you go. What you can do with this website here, as actual fact, is if we click on the mail, for example, we should ultimately get a graph. So that's the graph of the year, and that's pretty obvious. They're not particularly good. One of the ones that's particularly bad is the Irish Independent. Oh, you must have had a big winner. There you go. You had a winner at 56. Is that 56? Yeah, 56 BetDAC prices. And that's why that profit has suddenly jumped up. But before that, he was terrible. If we open it up and just let you see that frame, there's a record of all his picks over the year, and you'll find that this particular selector, tipster, is fairly wild in his selections. He has some really big price winners, and then he'll suddenly drop down to very short ones. So there's a 28 pick, which of course lost. The point I'm getting at here is you might look at this and think, well, there's no point in following this. You'd be right if you're going to back. But there may be lay opportunities there, or perhaps Dutching opportunities to Dutch these, or indeed oppose them. I'll let you investigate that further. But that's another area that I look at as well. If you have some tipsters that everyone follows, you may find it's more profitable actually opposing those tipsters. And the problem with these tipsters on this particular site is that they have to give a tip for every race, and that's incredibly difficult to achieve a profit by doing that. And so there's certainly scope there as a strategy for opposing those. But along the same vein, we saw within these things here, and in the race cards here, where we're getting selections or possible selections, that and where was the other one? Timeform. If we go back to that page here, Timeform's coming. If you spend some time analysing these selections and see how often they come in, is there scope for opposing them, Dutching them, Dutching the other horses? There's a whole host of potential options available to you in terms of either straight out punting, Dutching, or backing to lay, or indeed laying to back in running. Investigate them yourself. I'm not going to sit here and say, right, you do this and you'll get a profit, or do that and you'll get a profit. All I'm doing here is flagging up some resources that you may find useful, both in terms of your in-running trading, but also in terms of developing new strategies to look at. And I'm a great believer in experimenting with all sorts of different ideas, and a lot of it does take a lot of time, and a lot of them fall by the wayside because over the long term they're not profitable, and that's fine, because it allows you to discount these ideas, and quite often these ideas lead to something else, which then allows you to investigate other angles. And ultimately what you're trying to do is to obviously find something that works for you and makes a profit, but at the same time you're obviously trying to find some value there as well. And one of the ways of finding value is to go against the herd. So if everyone else is doing a particular thing, for example, backing the first thing on the Timeform 1, 2, 3 selection list, the odds for that is likely to drop. So you may find that you're no longer getting value on that particular runner. That selection may well go on and win, and most of their first selections may well go on to win. But long term, if you're punting, you may not be getting any value there, and so long term they may be a loser. But the whole idea of letting you see all of these things is to give you the resources at hand so that you can try and make a more educated guess. And let's face it, that's all this business is, guesswork. Make an educated guess on a pick or selection of picks that will give you an edge and therefore make a profit long term. Okay, thanks very much guys, speak to you later, bye.